Hi, Jill. Hey, everybody.
Hey, Tatiana.
We still have a couple more minutes until Lisa and Stephanie join us. So if you want to get up and stretch or get a water break, this would be the time.
Hey there, Stephanie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Is my
Good, good.
camera on?
It is. Yes, and
Okay.
you've got the official background as well. Very exciting. We're all in the same classroom here virtually together.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, yeah. How was your journey to your family's place or
Oh,
your mom's place, I think you mentioned?
it's been really good having my niece and my
Ah,
nephew around, and my son gets to play with his cousins, so that's been exciting, though they're much younger. So it's been a little bit of chaos, but it's
right.
good.
High
Yeah.
energy, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So we'd already read like 5 books by 7 a.m. this morning.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's more than I've read all year. No, I'm just kidding. I
Right.
read a lot. I read a lot. So I commend them reading 7 books already this morning. Amazing.
Yeah. Hmm.
So people will be officially joining us at 11:45 your time.
Wonderful.
So we'll wait for them to trickle in here. I don't know, or Stephanie, you've met Tatiana, but we've also got Jill with us here as well. Jill's going to be sort of moderating the chat with questions and things like that as well. So
Hi,
Perfect.
Stephanie.
she'll be
Nice to meet you.
supporting us because I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions and ideas and things that come through. I'm hoping that we can get to all of them, but we've got a lot packed in a little bit of time. So we'll see.
Hmm.
I like you're wearing the blue shirt too, eh? That really matches
See?
perfectly with the blue aesthetic. Wow.
There we go.
Yeah.
One of the team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're really the SpacesEDU mascot.
Get my face on a t-shirt.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. You get some Spaces swag with Stephanie's face on it.
Right, there you go. Just what every teacher wants to wear.
Exactly. Although I do hear that students love the swag, right? The students love
Yep.
like the pencils and the notebooks and the all the rest. So
Yeah.
maybe we can organize a little bit of that for sure.
That was half the fun of going to teaching conferences here in Alberta, is gathering up all the swag from the vendors and bringing it back to the classroom. It's like free prizes.
Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what was the favorite type of swag? Was it like pencils the kids really liked,
The
stickers?
squishy, the stress balls that they could throw at each other.
Oh, okay. That's one way to relieve stress, I suppose,
Yep.
throwing, stress
Sixth
balls
grade.
at
Yeah.
other.
Grade
Right.
six, it's a different level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're gathering up all the squishies and all that, and every teacher's taking every pencil they can find.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. A tradesies, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one, I still have the can. It was from the retirement fund here in Alberta. And they were called retire mints. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so funny. I love plays on words like that.
That's so funny.
Uh, hmm.
You can go ahead, Lisa, if you want to get started.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Should we wait for some more attendees to start, or we're good to go?
We're rolling. We're
All
rolling.
right, we're rolling. Perfect. All right. Well, welcome everyone to the second annual Back to School Summit with SpacesEDU. If you'd like to, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat here. What province or state you might be tuning in from today, what grades you teach, and perhaps also your level of familiarity with SpacesEDU as well. Are you brand new? Are you intermediate, experienced? Let us know and introduce yourself if you feel comfortable too. We're super excited to have you join us here today to really kick off the school year together and get excited about using SpacesEDU to support competency-based assessment in the classroom. This year, I don't know if anyone has attended the summits last year, but this year we're doing it a little bit differently. We're happy to have a fellow Spaces ADU educator here in the room with us, Stephanie Carpenter, and she's going to be sharing some of the ways that she's adopted Spaces EDU into her classroom. So we're super excited to have us join here today as well. And seeing all the chats coming in, perfect. We've got, oh, New Brunswick. Okay, awesome. BC, cool. Thank you. All right, we got the East and West Coast in the room. Perfect. All right. So with that, we'll just start with some introductions on our end here as well. I suppose I'll start with myself. I am Lisa Stevens. I'm a partner success specialist here at SpacesEDU. I support districts with the rollout of SpacesEDU, setting goals and setting a vision for the district and really supporting those steps along the way to really make that vision a reality. My background is in psychology, so I love things, wellness and student development. And I did work many years in education on kind of the administrative side of things. And I also worked in tech for many years. So working at SpacesEDU, I take a little bit of the tech, a little bit of the education, a little bit of the psychology and growth all in one place. So it's really meaningful to me. I'll go ahead, Stephanie, if you want to maybe introduce yourself as well. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, my name is Stephanie Carpenter. I'm an elementary teacher in Vanderhoof, BC, through School District 91. I've been using Spaces for 2 years, but I'd used other platforms in the past. And I've kind of become a super fan with it. So this is my 24th year of teaching.
Oh, wow. Amazing. We're so happy to have you here with us, Stephanie. We're also joined here today by my colleague, Jill. She's also a fellow partner success specialist at SpacesEDU. She's going to be in the chat to kind of help moderate. Now, we do, of course, encourage you to, to participate in the chat, ask questions in the chat. We'll try to get to as many of them as we possibly can today. We've got a packed agenda, though, so if we don't, we'll definitely follow up with you post-session for any answers that we didn't get to today. I did just want to take a quick moment here to really thank Stephanie for joining us here today. Stephanie is really truly a SpacesEDU superstar. She's been such an inspiration to myself and really the whole team here at SpacesEDU at really the really creative ways that she's using SpacesEDU within the classroom. So while today's session is really focused on competency-based assessment, I did want to take the opportunity, having such a wonderful educator in the room with us here, to really share some of her insights, on other ways that she's using SpacesEDU to support herself and her students and her families with SpacesEDU. So thank you again, Stephanie. We're super excited to have you here. Now, we're going to start off today's session with a little bit more of just a discussion. We are coming here today from educators, it looks like across North America or across Canada for the most part, what I'm seeing so far. So just firstly, on a personal level, let's ponder back to March 2020. How did technology change your teaching? What challenges or what successes have you since faced with technology in your experience? So if you want to put something in a chat, but maybe I'll ask Stephanie, tell us a little bit about your journey with technology and perhaps not your own, but maybe fellow educators that you've worked with. Was there some initial resistance? How did you kind of work with that resistance and kind of, embrace the learning journey with technology?
Okay, well, I think for me, there was no resistance. I'm a jump in, think about it later kind of person when it comes to things like this.
Yeah.
But introducing spaces and other technology to colleagues, I noticed some of them do have some resistance. And it can be something as simple as having to learn a new platform. Teachers are already really busy, and especially in 2020, when we switched to online, there was just so much thrown at educators that learning something else that was new was intimidating. They might not have the technology in their classroom. They might have, depending on the grade level you teach, I teach grade 5, 6, so they're pretty savvy. Actually, they pick stuff up pretty quick. But for the younger primary grades, there can be the thought that maybe the kids aren't going to understand how to use some of the technology that they have in the classroom or use it appropriately. And then there's the whole aspect of being online and having your grading system and the students' portfolios with your comments open to a wider audience and can be a little bit intimidating for people. So I think when I'm talking to people, those are some legitimate barriers, and some have a system that's just working for them already and they want to keep going with that. And I think all of these reasons are really, really valid. Um, but for me, it's been worth overcoming anything like that because of what digital portfolios and spaces in particular has allowed me to do in my classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, both your experience, but also fellow educators' experience as well. I think you mentioned we chatted about, spaces in particular sort of allowed you to see the bigger picture of student learning, right? So instead of, work coming in and just going back out, we really have that opportunity to really sit and reflect and kind of make a plan based on all that great information within Spaces EDU, kind of make a plan for growth kind of ongoing. So we'll try to
Mhm.
kind of, capture some of that there today.
Yeah.
One thing that you and I had talked about was using data, like data in the classroom. And, some initial perhaps confusion that some people might have about data or fear of data even. Can you speak to that journey as well in terms of your relationship with data?
Yeah. Okay, so to be fair, I'm a fan of data now, but I haven't always been. And in fact, when we started, I used to tell my principal, I hate every collaboration when we have to sit and talk about data because then we don't really do anything with it. Well, I mean, we do, but it didn't feel like there was enough progress to be made, and I couldn't really understand. To me, if you're going to spend the time and have conversations about what you're looking at and the results you're looking at, you have to have a plan for moving forward. And so when I first got on with Spaces, and as we get further in the presentation, I know we're going to talk about the proficiency report, which is one of my favorite things ever.
The real
But having
star.
that data really allowed me to look at my plans and what I wanted to do for my class, big picture, and see what was going on. I think as teachers, you understand what's going on in your classroom because you know your kiddos. But being able to have information to back up what you already know to be true is really, really valuable. And there were some things, some of the little sly ones I hadn't caught. And because Spaces ties it directly to the curricula that I'm teaching, which is the BC curriculum, there were outcomes and things that I was spending a lot of time with, and we were getting really good information on that. And then there was ones I was really kind of brushing past. So being able to look at that and make choices about where I was going to go next was really helpful. But I think one of my favorite things too is that also because the kids have that little feeder across the top of their space and they can see it. So kids were even making different decisions. That's surprised me. I was not aware that they were intuitive or aware enough about what was going on with the assessment to look at that and say, hey, wait, maybe I can do things a little bit differently too. And they were as well.
Absolutely. I love that. And we'll kind of showcase a lot of those different points that you just mentioned there. And I know that you've got a really great blog article on that whole experience as well, in terms of focusing on like the competencies and the content and things like that. So we'll share that later in the session. But I did just want to, I wanted to just throw in this funny little slide here. I listened to a podcast recently where they said it's always important to inject a little bit of fun into learning, and everyone loves a good meme, I think, at least I do. So all that to say, myself included, I took a data science course ages ago and I was wholly overwhelmed. But working with Spaces EDU, all that data is organized and captured so beautifully, and it's so easily digestible. So we're really going to showcase that here today on how you can feel empowered to leverage those Spaces EDU assessment and data tools for yourself, and then thus for your students as well. So with that, I did want to just kind of note here on, you had mentioned before, teacher empowerment. Data empowers teachers to choose how to spend their instructional time and how to kind of differentiate, for student needs there. So you had shared this quote with me and I really loved it. It really resonated with me, sort of about prioritizing your needs as an educator. So I'd love for you to kind of speak to this a little bit more before we really hop into kind of the demo portion here.
Okay. So I actually started my master's in ed tech, and I've been doing a lot of research on digital portfolios and all of those kinds of things. And make no mistake, I love them for kids. I think this is an amazing opportunity for kids. It's great. But I started to shift my focus a little bit into looking about what this can do for educators. And so for me, this is allowing me to look at my data, look at my planning, look at the assignments I'm doing, and look at my students a little bit differently. So there's a lot of things I love that if you were coming at it from a completely just a teacher lens, that this will do to enhance your teaching and your experience as a teacher. So yes, it's awesome for kids. Love that. But putting that aside, there's so many ways that it's great for teachers. I love being able to look at the big picture. I love looking at my proficiency report. I love being able to tag the different activities that I want. I even love setting up the curriculum goals so that I know what my focus is going to be. And you and I had talked about changing those up by term and stuff, and that hadn't even occurred to me. But I love being able to track what I've taught, what I haven't. I've kind of been playing around with the idea of autonomous accountability. Because in BC, of course, we have a lot of autonomy on how we teach the curriculum. But what I love is being able to look at the curriculum that I have, determine where I'm going to put my efforts and what I've already covered in a satisfactory manner, and the kids are showing some proficiency, and then moving it that way. I also really appreciate the fact that I can have kids submit things other than in written form. So kids who might not have a lot of written output, or that might not be their strength, and you know who I'm talking about when I say those, they seem to love to interact with the visuals and the audios and the videos that they can put forward. Excuse me, and do that. The other thing I like is if I'm focused on literacy skills with a kid, I can have them record things, and maybe they're working with my support worker, or maybe they're doing it themselves, and I can check that out later. So I'm not needed in those one-on-one interactions all of the time. And it allows me when I go home that I'm not bringing a stack of paper home. I'm literally just opening up my laptop and I'm seeing the same thing I see at school, and I open it up and I can do all my assessment right there because I have photos of all of their work, or I'm hearing audios of their work, or I'm seeing videos of what they're doing. And in BC, we have some of our outcomes which can be a little bit vague, and being able to visually see that learning suddenly makes them really more relevant. And so I love that. The other feature I would appreciate is that you can choose who sees what. So for example, I have a core competency space and I was playing with that last year. And core competencies are kind of our 21st century learning skills. They focus on the social, emotional, and the personal and the intellectual. And I created a space whereby kids were reflecting every week on their core competency goals, but I didn't want to share that with parents because I wanted to really focus on that journey and that process, and I didn't want to focus on the outcome yet. So I just closed that off from parents' view until report card time, and then we opened it up, and students were able to present that information to their parents and then have those really valuable conversations at home. So that's kind of a list of the things that I love most. But
Right. Yeah, and those are all lovely talking points, and I wish that we could dive into each one of those points here today. We are going to talk to a little bit of those, but put yourself first in SpacesEDU, find a workflow, find kind of the way that SpacesEDU works for you to best support your students and their families, if that's part of your goal there. So with that, we are going to sort of hop into today's focused agenda for the next about half an hour or so. We're going to start off with, what is competency-based assessment and standards-based grading? So we'll start there today. After doing a sort of a brief exploration of both concepts, we're going to dive into an assessment-focused workshop and demo of some of SpacesEDU's existing and newest assessment features. And then really, focus on how can we leverage those tools both for our own success, as you mentioned, Stephanie, and then for the success of our students as well. Now, if we have time, time permitting, Stephanie's got a whole lot of other lovely and amazing ideas on like how to continue that fostered learning community within the classroom. I don't know if we'll get there today. I hope to, but if not, we'll really focus on those assessment features here today. So I know that we sort of introduced ourselves in the chat here, but feel free to kind of put into the chat if you want to. Where are you at in your competency-based, or if you're maybe coming from the States, what in your standards-based assessment journey, where are you at today? How confident are you feeling? What challenges are you facing today? And is there anything particularly that you're wanting to get out of today's session as well when we're talking about competency-based assessment? If maybe Stephanie, what if you want to maybe share here, what was your journey like going from sort of the traditional grading to the competency focused or proficiency based grading?
Okay. So I actually started teaching elementary in 2010. Before that, I was a high school English teacher. And then I swapped after I had my second child and came into the elementary. And it was about that time things were ramping up and we were hearing about BC's new curriculum. And so I can only really talk to it from a BC lens, but we kind of piloted a little bit with the new curriculum. And then in 2016, it was introduced. And at the time, I don't think I really shifted. I think I still did what I was doing all along, and I just fitted in with the new curriculum. So I'd use it as a guide. I'd look at the curriculum and I'd say, yep, these are the things I need to focus on. Our curriculum's now divided into kind of a three-way thing of the big ideas, which is what students are supposed to understand, the curricular competencies, which is what students are supposed to be able to do, and the content, which is what students are expected to know. And I think I did focus on the content definitely, and I had an awareness of the big ideas, but I didn't really spend a lot of time with the curricular competencies. They were what I would use as examples in my lessons to get kids showing their learning, but I didn't really assess them at that time. And as I've become more familiar with the curriculum and as I've started to dive in, that's shifted. So it started with a shift in my assessment practices and my reporting. I guess it was my reporting first. My reporting practices, because the government told me I had to report that way, shifted first. And I would use the proficiency scale and I would assess on report cards. And then I started to do more of my regular assessments and now I'm at the place where I'm teaching and the kids are learning in that way. They're really aware of what our competencies are and we're using that vocabulary. We're developing a shared understanding of what those mean. We create little rubrics together, single point rubrics. I use Shannon Schinkel has done a lot of work with that and I'm all about that. And so we started looking at those kinds of things and bringing them in so that the kids are really aware, even as we're doing the learning, what our goal is and what our assessment practices are going to be. And then we use the proficiency scale, which for us goes from emerging to developing to proficient to extending. We use that to assess each of the outcomes as opposed to what we're creating per se. So when I'm looking at an essay, I'm not grading the essays the same way anymore. And as an English teacher, that was really hard for me. But now I'm using the essay to showcase the learning outcomes that I'm trying to get the kids to demonstrate. So that's where we started. And I am really excited about it now that I understand what it can do for me and what it can do for the kids. I find sometimes if we're only looking at the big picture, we miss all these little glimmers in the middle. So sometimes we can see the things where a kid who might not be strong and might not have a really proficient grasp of concepts, you can see those little glimmers on certain areas where they really can do it. They might not understand the content, but they understand the process. They can do the work. Perhaps it's adapted or we've made some changes to the expectations, but they can do the work at a certain level. And I'm not just looking at content anymore. I'm looking at their learning journey as opposed to the end point. And that's something I'm really, really proud of in my work.
Absolutely, yeah. And it sounds like that was sort of a learning journey in and of itself. And I just saw something in the chat here. Someone's still at the beginning of this journey in terms of how to get it out of my head and into the classroom. And I love that. I love that there because a tool like SpacesEDU can really put that very visible for you to kind of like take that journey from traditional to standards-based assessment or competency-based assessment, SpacesEDU kind of lays that all out for you. So really excited to dive into that here. Now, one of the questions I wanted to pose here as well, because this is going to tie into, our demo here, but why is competency-based assessment important, or why is standards-based assessment important to you? Or why does that matter to you as an educator?
Well, I think on a fundamental level, it's our curriculum. So therefore, I kind of view it as my job. So I think that's the starting place is where I started looking at it. But I think what intrigues me more is now you're looking at all the little bits and pieces instead of just the overall product. And again, it's that journey. So I can see where kids are coming from. I can see where they're going, and I can see the little road bumps that are getting in the way. And the things that we might be able to do differently. And Spaces allows them a platform to showcase those things differently. It also allows them a platform to showcase learning that might not happen within the walls of our classroom. And so they can do things, maybe they're at a hockey tournament. I come from a hockey town, it's really big here. Maybe they're at a hockey tournament, maybe they're running track, maybe they're learning to knit at home, maybe they're baking and showing an understanding of fractions. And all of those things now can be posted and can be assessed, and we can look at it and we can be talking about that, and they get that feedback right away. So I like that because it's taking something that's a really big. I think some of our courses and our classes that we have, they can have like 40 to 50 competencies. And so we can look at those and you can see the areas of strength for students, and you can see the areas that it might be a little bit more of a stretch that we need to continue to work on. And it individualizes it for kids because of course they're not going to be the same.
Right, of course. And I love that point too about, capturing learning wherever it happens, right? It doesn't have to be confined to, the classroom space. It could be anytime, anywhere. Capture an observation that you had at your hockey tournament or something like that. I really love that point there as well. Now, as we mentioned, there may be some participants here that are kind of early in their learning journey from traditional to that standards-based grading. Now, here, I'm not going to go through every single bullet point, but just to say, altogether, standards-based grading is much more student-centered, I would say. It's focused, as you mentioned, Stephanie, so much more on student growth and not simply a grade at a certain period in time. There is one particular bullet point here on this chart, though, that sort of resonated with me. And it's kind of under that traditional bullet point there about the leaning on assessments like quizzes and homework and essays and things like that. So on the assessments piece, Steph, can you speak to that there in terms of, shifting how you plan your activities or how you plan your assessments based on those standards?
I think for me, what I started to realize is there are so many ways for students to show their learning and show their understanding, and they didn't have to be formalized all the time. And before I had Spaces, I didn't have a method to be able to document that. I'm not really good with things like Excel and things like that. So tracking that was difficult for me. And so it was easier to rely on a quiz score out of 10 or an essay with a rubric and all of that to look at that. But even then, my rubrics weren't based on the actual curriculum I was teaching. They were based on the skills that I thought an essay needed. So does it have a strong introduction? Does it have a middle? Do you have grammatical skills? Are you sure? And now I've completely switched it around to document the actual curricular learning that I'm expected to show them and have them show some of those skills. So instead of being something that's just summative all the time, it's really more of a focus on that formative assessment and that formative learning. And then they get the feedback and they can continue to show growth. And if a student can pick it up in 3 or 4 different assessments, awesome. But if a student takes 10, 11, 12, or even more, we still have time to do that, and we can throw it in and repetitively look at it without it being the same. I'm not just throwing another quiz at them. We're adding this to another assignment. So maybe we're not looking at just an essay. Now we've got a formal piece of writing or an informal piece of writing, and now they're just responding to a prompt I put on their main feed. And so there's other ways to do it that don't have to be so official and big and kind of scary for students too.
Yeah, and I think you had mentioned as well, mastery might not be the end goal for all students, but proficiency and growth always is, right? And so that sort of those concepts kind of align beautifully with the BC curriculum and how that's laid out. I love how you mentioned too, just going backwards on, content versus competencies and focusing on competencies more. I love how you mentioned, content is what they can understand and competencies is how they can do it. So you're kind of teaching them those 21st century skills and competencies to allow them to master that content and just, master life essentially at the end of the day with those competencies that they've developed. So really, really excited about that concept. So with that, we are going to now dive into some of the assessment features in SpacesEDU. We started pretty question heavy here in terms of where are you at in your competency-based journey? Why does it matter? Next, we're going to show you how you can put some of those concepts that we just discussed into practice with SpacesEDU. We're going to start with curriculum tags, with that, connecting student work to those competencies, and, organizing your class in such a way that enables you to kind of focus on particular competencies and not just the content. From there, we're going to move to activities, which is a really robust assessment tool, and also for capturing evidence of learning connected to those competencies as well. In the creation of those activities, we'll kind of look at, backwards design. We'll start with what are those standards or outcomes first, and then, create the activity around those standards. And then we'll do a quick assessment on one of those activities using the proficiency scale and some descriptive feedback. And then we're going to look at the new growth book. So super exciting about that. And then lastly, we're going to look at the proficiency report, which is the star of the show, in my opinion, but it's a very powerful, rich, or data-rich tool, rather, that captures all of those above assessments holistically to help teachers make decisions on their instruction and support students in that growth journey. We're going to sprinkle in a few tips and tricks along the way here as well. So we've got quite a lot on the agenda. So without further ado, let's dive in here together. So I'm going to start here within my SpacesEDU class. Now this is a grade 6 classroom here. I think Stephanie mentioned you're a grade 5-6 split educator. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at those curriculum tags. So there's a few ways you can go about adding these to your classroom, but I'm just going to navigate here to the feed first. Okay. And so again, we might have some beginners in the room here, so we'll do a little bit of a refresher of what are curriculum tags. Curriculum tags are essentially a way for you to connect student work to those particular standards of your state or province, and also assess student work with the proficiency scale on those curricular tags there. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to add a set into my classroom. This is something that you'll do at the beginning of the year. You'll add in these curricular tags into your class. So you'll go to managing the tag sets, adding the curriculum tag set. Now we do have quite a few BC educators in the room here, so I'll go with British Columbia. We're going to go to, let's do English Language Arts in grade 6. And so as you'll see here, these are, so wonderfully designed and beautifully kind of laid out here, whereby in the English Language Arts, we've got the big ideas, and then we've got a section for those specific curricular competencies here, as well as the content, right? So as an educator, you may decide that you really just want to focus on, tagging that student work, particularly with those competencies to be developed throughout the year. Okay. So these are already in my class, but I'll go ahead and add that set there. Now, one thing that you do have as well as an educator, you'll notice on the side here that we've got pin tags. Now, these were formerly known as curriculum goals for anyone that's not familiar. But pin tags can essentially be used in a variety of ways. The function of pinned tags is sort of in the name. What tags do you want to pin to the top of the feed, or the top of your assessment dialogue to really focus on throughout the year? I'm curious, Stephanie, you had some really interesting ideas about how you use pin tags in your classroom.
Well, last year what I started doing is I actually went through the curriculum a bit with the kids, and we chose the ones that we thought would be most important to learn. At that time, you were limited. There wasn't quite as many as there are now, but and we had a lot because it's a split class. So we had the grade 5, all the grade 5 outcomes, and we had all the grade 6 ones. And in language arts, I think there's about 14 of them that overlap, but the rest of them are all unique or built on the one from the year prior. And so it was important to kind of have both. But what we did is we used those as the ones that we were going to focus on, and students knew that they were there. Sometimes I'll put up my main feed, not the one where I assess kids, but I'll put up my main feed on the board, and students can kind of see that, which is our version of looking at the proficiency report when we're looking at it together, because I don't want to show them individuals. But So this year, what we're going to do is we're actually going to go through them together. The students are going to identify the ones that we are going to work on more and focus on, and we're going to tag them and have them sitting up there and then constantly refer back to them so that they can reflect.
I love that. So you're kind of making it a collaborative effort here in terms of, as a class, what we want to focus on. I love that.
We're going to try. We're going to try.
Right. Yeah. And so just to show you how you can do that, I already have 7 tags here. So this is on an educator, like a per teacher basis. I think Yvette had that question. So as a teacher, I am deciding within my class, that maybe I just want to focus on, these particular competencies here. You can, of course, add areas of focus across the different tag sets that you've added into your classroom. And these are dynamic as well. So maybe at the beginning of the year, we're focusing on these particular competencies. And then maybe towards the middle of the year or towards the end of the year, we're focusing on these other competencies here. So you can edit these kind of as you go. And just a note as well, you can add up to 50 tags, or sorry, pinned tags. Like you can have 50 pinned tags here. So what we're looking at on the right is, for these particular curricular competencies, we have, tag student work, applied proficiencies, but these we haven't yet covered in the class. So this is a very easy way for me to look and say, oh, you know what, maybe next we'll talk about, or I'll create some activities and assignments around exchanging ideas and, using and experimenting with oral storytelling processes. Okay, so those are just a few of the ways that you can use pin tags within your SpacesEDU classroom environment here. So with that, I will go ahead next, and we're going to focus on some activities next. So up at the top here, we've got the activities feature. Now, activities, as I mentioned earlier, are a very robust assessment tool. They really allow for teachers to plan ahead and organize some of their assessment goals, curriculum and competency coverage for the year ahead. With a single activity, as you can see here, if educators wish to, they can assign start dates and due dates. They can pre-tag that work so that students know when they see that activity what the learning goals are for that particular activity as well. A fun fact, or a did you know that I'll throw in here as well, is that the activities that you create in your classroom this year, you can use those again next year. You don't have to recreate them. What you can do is essentially, when I go to create new activities, as you'll see here, you might not have this many, although you might eventually in years come. I have 194 activities that I can very simply use that activity from last year or from another class that I'm a co-teacher of, and use those in this year's class, which is really great. So one less thing to do next year. But let's go ahead, let's just try creating a new activity here. Okay, so from the top, I'm going to really fly through this super quickly just for the sake of time. But essentially what I'm doing is I'm assigning this activity to the class that I'm in currently. I'm going to decide that this activity perhaps is better for kind of one-to-one assessment and feedback. So I'm going to put this into that one-to-one portfolio space. Now, in the the fashion of starting with those standards first, I'm going to actually navigate down here to really add those tags first. What are those outcomes or the standards that this activity is going to focus on? Now, when I add those tags here to this activity, as you'll see, I have those pin tags already accessible to me. Okay, so I do have quite a few tag sets across, various subjects and things like this, but because I've pinned those tags, those are very easily accessible to me right now. So let's go ahead and choose, 3 particular areas of focus for this activity. Okay, and now, what we can do is we can add a title for the activity. Let's name this title, perhaps Exploring the News. Okay, I'm going to do just a quick little copy paste here. Okay, I can use the rich text formatting if I so wish to. Okay, so that's really connected to those standards and learning outcomes. Now, from a planning perspective, I'm going to schedule this into the future. Okay, so just for planning purposes, I'm going to say that this is not going to start or be, accessible to students until, let's say, October 1st. Okay, so I can kind of make that pointed planning here to have that all ready to go. That will be visible to students on October 1st. All right, there's a few other activity settings here. This one is quite exciting. I'm not going to toggle this on yet, but we are going to explore the growth book in a moment. We can sync these assessment activities into the growth book that I'm going to show you. But for now, I'm going to quickly assign this activity for my students here. Okay, so you'll see that in the future, it is going to be scheduled in October, the Exploring the News activity here. What I'm going to show you next is I'm going to show you just a quick assessment on one of the existing activities that we've already got in view here. So I'm going to go ahead and explore. Let's go to the memory narrative activity here. Okay. So for this one, we can see of the students in my class that Ananth has submitted his memory narrative. And so when we go into this particular assessment panel, I like to call it, what we're seeing here is on the left-hand side of the page, these are the artifacts that are the submission that Ananth has uploaded. Now, with any activity, you can add up to 10 media files for this. So it could be a video, it could be audio, it could be a written document here, it could be all of the above. So it really gives students that voice and choice in how they wish to display those competencies or connection to those learning outcomes here. So as I'm looking at Ananth's work on the left, I do have those pre-tagged work here where I can go ahead and provide that proficiency level for Ananth on this particular activity. Okay. And one quick thing here while we're here, these tags, this activity was sort of pre-tagged with those outcomes, but let's say Ananth in this particular example displayed a competency in social studies or a competency in the sciences or something like that. I can edit this down for Ananth specifically as well. I can add additional tags, remove tags, things like that. So that is a possibility with activities here as well. As you'll notice towards the bottom of this panel here, we do have the feedback that I've provided with Ananth. And again, a lot of different media options for providing that feedback, both in written, but also in a voice note here. I provided that for Ananth and really giving Ananth, that feedback on, the connection to those learning outcomes, how they're doing in relation to those standards, and then what he can focus on next. So with all that, I will go ahead and post this into Ananth's portfolio, and we'll come back to this a little bit later in the session as well. All right, just going to take a look at the chat here if there's anything I can clarify. Okay. Perfect. So what we'll do next is, and I'm quite excited for this one here, we are going to showcase another one of our assessment features, which is the growth book. So as you'll notice, both new SpacesEDU educators and existing educators, we do have a new assessment tab here in SpacesEDU. So this was a part of our release that happened earlier in August. So really that dedicated a focused assessment tab here that houses both the growth book and the proficiency report. Now hopping into this growth book here, the growth book is essentially a standards-based, proficiency-based grade book, essentially. The growth book enables educators to record assessments on the fly without necessarily having to create a post or uploading an artifact for each and every assessment created in SpacesEDU. So as you're aware, you can create posts throughout the year where students can upload their work via a post. They can upload those videos and recordings, to that activity. But this year, the intention of this really is to just kind of record those assessments on the fly. So imagine you have, a stack of book reports right next to you, and you just want to kind of record those assessments in this vehicle. That's the way that you can do that here. So what we're looking at is I've created 2 assessments here already. But what you'll notice too here on this page is we do have this highlighted in green here. Now, this is one of those activities that I had created earlier. Now, just so you're aware, this growth book, it can sync to the activities that we've created. So all of the assessments that I record on this particular activity here, those will sync back to the activity and vice versa. If I record the assessment within the activity, that will also sync back to the growth book here. Okay, so what we're seeing in this page as well, so of course we're seeing all the students in my class, we're seeing the particular assessments, and then the standards that are being assessed. And then we've got, of course, the proficiency scale to apply for each of those assessments. Now, what I'm going to do next is I am going to show you how quickly you can just, quickly create an entry for this growth book here. So I'm going to click entry here. I'm going to just simply create a title. So let's call this storytelling across cultures. Okay. And then I can add the standards or the competencies that I will be assessing. Now, again, I do have those curricular tags that I've pinned already. So just for sake of ease of time here, I'm going to add in some of those pinned tags and click create. Okay, easy, just a few clicks and I'm now ready to assess. There's a few ways that you can go about doing the assessment. We do have the possibility for keyboard shortcuts in the future, but right now I am just kind of showing you how I can very quickly record those assessments here. Very exciting. Any questions? Just looking at the chat here. That's a great question, Kevin. So Kevin had mentioned the growth book can it be used to generate an interim report so that a given student can be sent home to parents. That's a great call out. And that's actually a great point too, because I'll mention here for this growth book and the proficiency report, this is a teacher only tool. Right. So we mentioned earlier about, you know, the fear of, or maybe the vulnerability of sharing data. Maybe teachers aren't ready to share this data with their students or with their families just yet. So this is kind of up to the teacher to use how they see fit. Now, what you will notice though, on the very top right, is we do have this export function, right? So if a teacher does want to download this report, put it into their own record keeping in their own Excel sheet, or do whatever they wish to do with that report, share it, you know, with students and or families, that's something that they can do. So they do have that download function here. And then what you'll notice here while I'm here, we do have filtering capabilities for this report too. So we can, you know, focus on particular students. We can focus on particular tags and particular, you know, subjects essentially, and then by entry as well. So maybe if I want to look just at, you know, a particular entry to isolate that, that's a possibility within the growth book here. Now, what I'm going to show next, and I've got just a few minutes to do so, but this really is the star of the show, I would say, as I mentioned before. This is the proficiency report. So another really awesome, holistic, standards-based assessment report. What you'll see here, it's really visually displaying that growth over time with charts and feeds and data, and really just kind of like a visual bird's eye view of how your students are doing in the class. Now, how this proficiency report works, essentially it automatically pulls that data, that assessment data, from the posts in the classroom, from the activities in the classroom, and soon those growth book entries as well. So those growth book entries in our next release, so late October, those will all be included in this assessment picture here. So it really enables educators with better in-depth data analysis, makes them really easy to kind of identify gaps in classroom and student learning and kind of, you know, action on what they're seeing here in this report. Now, as I mentioned, this is a teacher-only tool. We'll also mention here just a few things at what we're looking at. We've got our students on the left-hand side here. We've got the various tags across all that data within SpacesEDU. And you'll see here too, the focus of this report is by default, it's most recent. So where is the student at more recently? Now, as I go through this report, Stephanie, to kind of say some of the ways that you've used the proficiency reports within your classroom.
Well, when this one first came out, this was really exciting to me. I do wish it downloaded in the color. It downloads as an Excel document, which isn't quite as user-friendly. So I would love if it downloaded like this. But once I realized what I could play with it, so it's set to most recent, but sometimes I wanted to look at it by subject area, and you can filter that way, or you can filter by certain tags, or even by student. And so what I used it when I could filter it by student is I would just call students up and I would show them, this is where you're at right now. This is what we're looking at. And then they can, when you click on, like if you are pulling up an assignment and you click on one of them, it'll actually take you to all the assignments where that proficiency was assigned as well, which is really nice to be able to use. I haven't used it during a parent-teacher interview yet. I'm not quite there yet, but I think that would be an excellent place to be able to show parents kind of what's going on with theirs. But I have used it with students and we have looked at it. The other thing we've done is we've taken some of those ones that were they're now pinned, the pinned competencies or whatever that word is, but the pinned ones that were the curriculum goals before. And we've pulled it up as a class, and I just moved the screen over so they can't see kids' names. And we've looked at it and we go, are we there yet? And having those conversations with kids has been really helpful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that point that you mentioned about the feed there, when we talk about that student growth and making that visible, going into that particular standard or competency, we can see where the student had started off with, their English language competencies, and then again seeing that feed of that visual growth. So it is such a powerful tool here. Now, I wish we could dive into this more, but we are unfortunately just at time. So I am going to kind of wrap things up here from today's session, just to really quickly go over some of the things that we had gone through today. Those curriculum tags, adding those to your class, focusing on competencies and using those pin tags. With the activities and assessment, really focusing on the outcomes or the standards first, and then maybe using activities to be the vehicle for collecting evidence for those particular tags, and then maybe using the growth book to do kind of those quick assessments in between those kind of on the fly. So using the growth book for that use case there. And then lastly, we looked at that proficiency report as a really powerful tool to really track student and class progress with those competencies. It really helped us to identify opportunities for growth, both on a personal student level and across the class, and then using that assessment data to inform some of that instructional decisions within the classroom as well. And then as Stephanie had mentioned, to conference with students with that or to empower them to engage in their learning and set goals on, what to focus on next. So to conclude, love a good meme. Here we've captured the learning journey as educators from, what is data and how do I use it, to having all of this assessment data at our fingertips, and how can we use that to help the students in their learning journey with a thumbs up there. So I wanted to thank everyone so much for joining us here today. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us as well, and all of your lovely insights. We hope that you found it helpful. If you would like to give us some descriptive feedback on the session, we'd love you to do that with the link provided here, and Jill will throw that in the chat as well. If we didn't answer any questions, we will follow up with those answers with you, but you can always reach out to our team at any time at hello@spacesedu.com. And just to continue the discussion here as well, we do have some really exciting upcoming webinars too. Recently, we had a podcast on embracing competency-based education, so that link is in the chat as well. And we've got another webinar coming up next week as well. And then Stephanie, all of your great insights as well are also shared on your blog, The Digital Musings of an Analog Mind. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for your questions and participation, and looking forward to supporting you all this year with SpacesEDU. All right, take care everyone. Happy start to the school year.